Yay for handing my brother every document after my parents gave him the business? My name is Jade, I'm 33, and until 3 months ago, I ran the parts of my family's event rental business that nobody wanted to admit existed. I live in a quiet rental duplex about 15 minutes from our warehouse outside Madison, Wisconsin. Most nights, I ate dinner over my laptop while answering emails about tent permits, missing chair counts, or somebody's mother-in-law threatening to leave a 1-star review because the linens were champagne instead of warm ivory. My parents founded Harbor and Pine Event Rentals when I was in middle school, and my older brother Mason has been called the future of the business since before he could correctly spell invoice. Harbor and Pine is not glamorous, even when our work looks glamorous from the outside. We rent tents, tables, chairs, staging, heaters, linens, dance floors, portable bars, and all the little things people only notice when they are missing. Our warehouse sits off a highway frontage road in a low, gray building that smells like coffee, wet cardboard, and vinyl tablecloths. The front office has 2 desks, an ancient printer that jams when it senses fear, and whiteboards covered with delivery routes, load-in windows, dock restrictions, and warnings like "Do not send black skirting to St. Mark's again." My dad, Rick, is 64 and still introduces himself as the man who built the company with 2 folding tables and a pickup truck. My mom, Linda, is 61 and handles the legacy story. She loves telling clients that Harbor and Pine is a family business, which sounds warm until you realize family usually means Mason gets praised in public and I get corrected in private. Mason is 36. He is charming in a very specific way that works best over appetizers and weak coffee at Chamber of Commerce breakfasts. He can shake hands, remember someone's kid plays soccer, and talk about brand direction, without ever explaining what direction the brand is supposed to go. He shows up for photos, client lunches, and ribbon cuttings. He disappears during payroll weeks, inventory counts, angry bride calls, tax document prep, and any conversation involving certificates of insurance. My parents always framed that as a personality difference. Mason is big picture, my dad would say. You're just better at details, my mom would add, like it was a compliment instead of a sentence. The thing about event rentals is that details are the business. A tent is not just a tent. It is a permit application, a site map, staking permission, fire inspection rules, wind ratings, delivery access, a crew that knows whether the venue has a loading dock, and a client who needs to understand that grass plus rain plus stilettos equals a problem nobody wants to discover during cocktail hour. A rental agreement is not just paperwork. It is the difference between keeping a client and eating $8,000 because someone promised a refund clause that did not exist. Mason called it paperwork because he had never stayed late enough to see what happened when the paperwork was wrong. The night everything changed was Harbor and Pine's 20th anniversary party. My parents rented a banquet room at a hotel near Middleton, which was funny because we supplied half the linens and cocktail tables ourselves. I spent the afternoon fixing a dessert invoice because the caterer had billed us twice for mini cheesecakes, then changing the next morning's route because a school fundraiser moved its load-in from the front entrance to the gym doors behind the cafeteria. I showed up to the party wearing a navy dress and holding a clipboard because one of our drivers had texted me that the box truck's liftgate was sticking again. Mason showed up holding a beer and posing in front of the slideshow. There were about 70 people there. The guest list included employees, vendors, a few longtime clients, my parents' friends, and some local business people who liked free food and networking. Trevor, our warehouse lead, stood near the back with 2 delivery guys, all of them looking uncomfortable in button-down shirts. Trevor is 29, quiet, practical, and allergic to drama. He had worked for us for 6 years and knew exactly who got called when a crew was short, a tent pole went missing, or a client swore we promised 20 extra cocktail tables that were never on the estimate. After dinner, my dad clinked a fork against his glass. My mom stood beside him, already misty-eyed. Mason moved closer to the small stage without being asked, which should have warned me. Dad started with the usual speech. He thanked our employees, our clients, the community, and the good Lord for 20 years of hard work. He talked about buying our first truck, about the county fair contract that nearly broke us in year 3, and about how proud he was that Harbor and Pine had stayed local. Then he put his hand on Mason's shoulder. And now, Dad said, his voice getting thick, it's time to look toward the future. Mason has always had the vision for where Harbor and Pine is headed. By the end of this year, He'll be stepping in as CEO and taking this company into its next chapter. People clapped. Some loudly, some politely. I stood near the dessert table with my clipboard pressed against my stomach. Mom dabbed her eyes and leaned into the microphone. And of course, Jade has helped us so much with paperwork behind the scenes. We couldn't have kept things moving without our behind-the-scenes girl. Behind-the-scenes girl. I was 33 years old. I had handled payroll, insurance, vendor terms, hospital renewals, delivery systems, and more emergency calls than I could count. Mason raised his beer and grinned at me. Don't worry, Jade. I'll still need you running the desk. A few people laughed because they thought they were supposed to. Trevor did not. He looked at me with an expression that said he was sorry. I smiled. Not because it was fine. Not because I was too stunned to speak. I smiled because in that moment, I understood something clearly enough that it almost calmed me down. They hadn't forgotten what I did. They had edited me out on purpose. The rest of the party moved around me like bad weather. People congratulated Mason. My dad introduced him to a county business journal writer as our next CEO. My mom squeezed my arm and whispered, "Isn't this exciting?" I said, "Big night." She smiled in relief, probably because she mistook control for agreement. On my way home, Mason texted the family group chat. "Mason, great night. Tomorrow we should start leadership alignment. Dad, proud of you, son." Mom, such a beautiful evening. Jade, thank you for helping with the dessert issue. I sat in my car outside my duplex, the dashboard clock glowing 10:47 p.m., and stared at the messages until my screen dimmed. Then I went inside, microwaved the pasta I had forgotten to eat before the party, opened my laptop, and looked at the shared drive. The next morning, Mason arrived at the office 20 minutes late wearing a new quarter zip with the Harbor and Pine logo. He carried a notebook he had probably bought for the occasion and a coffee from the expensive place near the highway. I was already there because payroll had to be submitted by 11 a.m. if we wanted direct deposits to hit on time. He leaned on the frame of my office door and said, "Morning. We need to streamline some things." "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious. Now that we're formalizing the transition, I need a quick list of all active accounts, vendor contacts, payroll access, insurance logins, client preferences, renewal deadlines, contracts, estimates, the whole thing." I looked up from the payroll screen. "Which part of the whole thing?" He made a vague circle with his hand. "You know, the business stuff." "The business stuff is the business." He laughed like I was being cute. "Right, and that's why we need it centralized. Put everything in one folder for me." Everything already is centralized. There are folders by category, year, client, vendor, and active obligations. Great. Then just make it easy. I wanted to ask what he thought easy looked like when we had 200 active rental agreements, 4 seasonal vendor contracts, 3 insurance renewal cycles, a payroll provider, municipal permit requirements in 6 different towns, and a hospital network proposal that required updated additional insured language by Friday. Instead, I said, "I'll send you the access map." He pointed at me like we were in a podcast clip. That's the kind of leadership support I'm talking about. By lunch, he had forwarded me 11 emails with "handle this" written above them. He copied Mom and Dad on 6. Out of those, 2 were from clients he had personally introduced himself to at the party as the new CEO. One was from a nonprofit asking if he could confirm whether their tent deposit was refundable if the county denied the permit. He sent it to me with the note, "Can you weigh in on the technical side?" The technical side was the contract. That afternoon, I asked my parents to talk in Dad's office. It was barely an office, really. It was more of a room with old framed photos, a filing cabinet, and a desk covered in gas receipts he meant to enter into QuickBooks but never did. I closed the door. "Why did you describe my job as helping with paperwork?" Mom sighed before I even finished, which told me she had rehearsed being tired of my reaction. "Jade, the speech wasn't the place to list everyone's duties. You didn't have to list everyone's duties. You could have said operations." Dad folded his arms. "You are important. Nobody said you weren't. You said Mason has the vision. Mom said I keep paperwork moving. Mason told employees I could run the desk under him." Dad's jaw tightened. "Clients expect a strong face. Mason is good at that." The word face sat in the room like a bad smell. What does leadership mean if he can't run payroll? I asked. Mom's mouth pinched. Don't be unfair to your brother. I'm asking a business question. Dad leaned back in his chair. No, you're making this about ego. That almost made me laugh. Mom softened her voice. Honey, Mason needs support. This is a big adjustment for him. You know how your brother is. I did know. That was the problem. When Mason wrecked Dad's riding mower as a teenager, I was told to help clean up the garage because your brother already feels bad. When he forgot a school fundraiser order, I packed boxes at midnight while Mom told me, you're just naturally responsible. When he missed a delivery route during his first real summer at the company, I called the bride, apologized for a mistake I did not make, and got a replacement crew there before the ceremony. Mason got praised for learning under pressure. I got asked why I sounded short on the phone. I left Dad's office with no apology and no confusion. Exactly 2 days later, Alana Brooks called me. Alana was the director of operations for a regional hospital network that used us for donor galas, fundraising dinners, staff appreciation events, and emergency outdoor setups when construction or weather made indoor plans impossible. She was 42, calm, precise, and not easily impressed. I liked working with her because she asked hard questions before an event instead of screaming during one. Jade, she said, do you have 5 minutes? For you, yes. I received an email from Mason introducing himself as the new primary operations contact for our renewal. I closed my eyes. Her tone stayed even. Is this an ownership change, an operations change, or just a title change? That depends who you ask. A pause. That is not reassuring, she said. No, I know. I need to confirm a few things. Will Harbor and Pine's certificate of insurance still list our network and foundation arm as additional insured for temporary structures and event equipment? Yes. The renewal certificate is due Friday by 5 p.m. I already sent the wording to our broker. And municipal tent inspection coordination? We have 3 sites this year, 2 with fire marshal review. I have those deadlines in the account folder. Cancellation language? Mason's draft referenced a standard weather cancellation clause, but our agreement has a modified force majeure provision approved by legal. My stomach dropped. Mason sent you a draft? He did. Do not sign that. It's wrong. I wasn't planning to. Her voice had gone clipped. It was not angry but documented. Alana did not ask questions for fun. She asked them because she was assessing risk. After we hung up, I checked the hospital client folder. Mason had changed the renewal contact sheet to list himself as primary operations lead. He had not removed me completely, just pushed me down to office support. Then I found a draft email in the shared marketing inbox from a writer at a county business journal. The subject line was, Feature Draft Harbor and Pine Next Generation Leadership. I opened it. There was Mason, quoted under a photo of himself standing in front of a huge white tent, talking about securing the hospital network partnership and expanding Harbor and Pine's institutional client base through strategic relationship building. The draft called him the second-generation strategist behind the company's growth. I stared at the photo for a long time. That tent was from the hospital gala 3 years earlier. The real story of that account was not strategic relationship building. It was Mason promising a 60 by 120 pole tent during peak graduation season without checking inventory. We did not have it available. I found out 5 days before the gala. I still remember standing in the warehouse at 9:30 p.m., staring at the inventory board while Trevor said very carefully, "We don't have that tent." I called Mason first. He said, "Can't we just use 2 smaller ones? For a hospital donor gala with a single approved site map, fire lanes, catering access, and a stage layout." "No," I said. "We cannot just use 2 smaller ones." He told me I was being negative. Called Alana next. She answered on the second ring. "I don't care whose fault it was," she said after I explained. "Can you fix it?" "Yes," I said, even though I was not completely sure yet. "But I need you to approve the revised site map in the next 10 minutes. I spent that night calling 2 vendors. I negotiated a tent from one, sidewalls from another, adjusted our insurance certificates, got our broker to issue revised documents at 6:40 a.m., rerouted trucks, begged a city inspector not to cancel the permit review, and promised Trevor overtime and breakfast if he could get a crew loaded by dawn. At 4:35 a.m., I sat in my car outside the warehouse and slept for 40 minutes with my phone on my chest. The first truck left at 5:15. The gala happened. The donors stayed dry. The hospital signed the annual agreement. Mason told my parents the client had been a little high maintenance, but I smoothed it over. Seeing him turn that into a magazine quote made my hands go cold. That Friday, Alana asked me to meet for coffee. She chose a place near the hospital offices, not near our warehouse. That told me plenty. She arrived with a slim laptop bag, and the expression of someone who had already decided not to waste time. "I'm going to be direct," she said after we sat down. "Our internal vendor notes list you as the required operations contact for Harbor and Pine." I blinked. They what? After the gala issue 3 years ago, I added a risk note. Harbor and Pine remained approved because you demonstrated corrective action, documentation, and reliable follow-through. I looked down at my coffee. It had a little leaf pattern in the foam, which felt absurdly delicate for the conversation. "My family thinks Mason landed that account," I said. "Your last name didn't keep that account," Alana replied. "Your follow-through did." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh but not quite. She leaned back. "To be clear, I'm not promising anything if you leave. We follow procurement rules. I cannot and would not move business based on personal loyalty." "I understand. But I am telling you that if Harbor and Pine changes operational control, we will evaluate that change. Your family may not take risk documentation seriously. I do. My family doesn't see it that way. Your family isn't the one signing our risk reports." I drove back to the warehouse in silence. By then I knew I was leaving. Not storming out. Not deleting files. Not exposing Mason in some dramatic speech. I had spent too many years being useful to people who confused my silence with consent. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of calling me unstable. If they wanted paperwork, I was going to give them paperwork so complete they couldn't say I left them blind. That weekend, I worked from my kitchen table with the windows open and a half-eaten turkey sandwich beside my laptop. I created a spreadsheet titled Active Obligations Transition. It had tabs for payroll, insurance, vendor contracts, client renewals, municipal permits, active estimates, deposits due, cancellation windows, W-9s, tax documents, delivery route notes, and open complaints. I linked every company-owned file to the company shared drive. I moved records out of my personal folders and into the proper Harbor and Pine storage. I removed my personal credit card from the emergency print vendor account, deleted saved passwords, turned off auto-forwarding rules, and wrote instructions so plain that a person would have to choose not to read them. I did not take client lists. I did not download confidential pricing. I did not touch anything that did not belong to me. On Monday morning, I sent one email to my parents, Mason, Monica Reyes, our accountant, and Kelly, our part-time office manager. Subject: Transition Notice and Active Operations Summary. Hi all. This email confirms my resignation from Harbor and Pine Event Rentals, effective 2 weeks from today unless leadership prefers an earlier transition date. I have uploaded all company-owned operational documents I maintain to the shared drive under Transition May. The Active Obligations Tracker includes current payroll status, open client issues, vendor deadlines, permit dates, insurance renewals, and file paths for supporting documents. Please review the hospital network insurance renewal deadline due Friday at 5 p.m. The certificate must include the network and foundation arm as additional insured, using the wording in the client folder. Thank you, Jay. I read it 3 times before sending. There were no accusations. No references to the anniversary party. No mention of Mason's magazine draft. Just facts, deadlines, and access. Dad came into my office 11 minutes later. Mom was behind him, pale and tight-lipped. Mason hovered near the hallway, holding his phone like it might defend him. Dad shut the door but not all the way. "What exactly is this?" "My resignation. You don't get to threaten this family." "I'm not threatening anyone. I gave notice." Mom stepped forward. "Jade, let's not make this difficult." "I'm not." Dad slapped the printed email on my desk. "You think you can just walk out because your feelings got hurt? I looked at him for a second, then at the payroll reminder still open on my screen. I think I can resign from a job. This is not just a job. You made that clear when you gave it to Mason. Mason scoffed. Nobody gave me anything. I earned this. I did not look at him. That helped. Dad's face turned red. If you want to act ungrateful, you can leave today. We don't need 2 weeks of attitude. Mom made a small sound. Rick, she warned. No, he said. She wants to make a point. Let her make it from home. I sat still long enough for the words to land. He thought this was punishment. He thought I would panic, apologize, maybe cry, and offer to stay if he let me. Instead, I saved the payroll screen, logged out, and stood up. Okay. Dad blinked. Okay. I gave notice. You accepted it early. I removed my mug from the desk. It said, "But did you check the contract?" Trevor had given it to me after a client tried to argue with a signed cancellation policy. I took my cardigan from the back of my chair and a framed photo of my dog, Pepper, from beside the monitor. I left the company laptop on the desk because it was theirs. Mason leaned against the wall with a smug little smile. You'll be back by Monday. Picked up my keys. Then Monday should be easy. The office was silent when I walked out. Trevor stood by the route board with a roll of tape in his hand. He did not say anything, but he gave me one small nod. That first afternoon, I went home and did something I had not done in years. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and took a nap. When I woke up, there were 17 messages. Most were from the work group chat. Kelly, does anyone know where the signed estimate is for the Verona graduation setup? Mason, Jade, where are vendor W-9s? Mason, never mind, found folder, but there are too many subfolders. Trevor, which truck has the repaired lift gate? Mason, why is the hospital folder locked? Kelly, it isn't locked. You have to use the company login. Mason, Jade, can you answer this one thing? I replied once. Jade, please contact Mason. He has the transition folder. Then I muted the chat. The cracks started small, which is how real workplace failures happen. With missed handoffs, wrong assumptions, and people being too embarrassed to admit they do not understand something until it has already cost money. Mason sent a delivery crew to the front entrance of a school fundraiser, even though the route board clearly said gym doors behind cafeteria. No front unloading during pickup. The crew waited 40 minutes while the school secretary called the office 3 times. He used an outdated linen quote for a bride who had upgraded from polyester to satin, then told Kelly to smooth it over. When the bride noticed the difference, he missed the Gusto payroll cutoff by 22 minutes, which meant direct deposits landed a day late. Trevor texted me privately that night. Trevor, not asking you to fix anything. Just thought you should know payroll was late. I stared at the message for a while before answering. Jade, I'm sorry. That affects you guys and it shouldn't. Trevor, yeah. But I'm also not surprised. A minute later he added. Trevor, I'm not asking you to fix it. I just wanted you to know you weren't imagining things. I sat on my couch with the TV paused and felt something in my chest loosen. Monica, our accountant, was the next person to push back. She had worked mostly with me for years because Dad hated tax documents and Mason thought W-9s were admin clutter. When Mason sent her incomplete records for quarterly filings, she replied with me still copied because she had not realized I was gone. Monica, I cannot prepare filings from screenshots and partial exports. Please provide the documents listed in Jade's transition tracker, payroll and tax tabs, lines 14 to 28. Mason replied all. Mason, we're in a leadership transition and need flexibility. Monica answered 7 minutes later. Monica, tax deadlines do not adjust for leadership transitions. I did not respond, but I did smile. By the second week, the hospital network issue had turned serious. Mason missed the Friday 5 p.m. deadline for the updated certificate of insurance. The broker had sent the certificate to him Thursday morning with a question about the additional insured wording. The answer was in the folder. Mason did not reply until Monday. Alana scheduled a compliance call. I know this because Mason called me 6 times in a row before leaving a voicemail. Jade, it's me. Listen, I know things got tense or whatever, but I need you to jump on a quick call with the hospital people. It's not a big deal. They're just being corporate. Call me back. I did not. Mom called next. Honey, she said in her voicemail, her voice soft and strained. Mason is trying very hard and there are just some things you know better. It would be mature of you to help him through this transition. Dad did not leave a voicemail. He just texted. Dad, family loyalty matters. Call your brother. I replied. Jade, all hospital renewal materials are in the transition folder. I am not available for Harbor and Pine work. The compliance call happened without me. Trevor later told me about it, and Alana confirmed enough months later that I know the shape of it. Mason joined the call with Dad. Alana had someone from procurement and someone from legal on the line. She asked about additional insured language, weather cancellation clauses, load-in timing for the donor gala, backup vendor capacity, and fire inspection coordination for the temporary structures. Mason started with charm. We're really excited to continue aligning with your events team, he said. Harbor and Pine is moving into a more client-facing leadership model. Alana said, I appreciate that. Who is responsible for submitting municipal permit documentation for the June Foundation event? Mason said, our office handles that. Who specifically? A pause. Dad said, we have staff for that. Alana asked, what is your backup plan if the primary 60 by 120 structure is unavailable due to vendor failure or weather delay? Mason said, we've always been able to make things happen. That is not a plan, Alana said. Then legal asked why the draft renewal Mason sent had the wrong cancellation clause. Mason apparently blamed me. Jade usually handled the technical side, he said. She's not being available right now. Alana's response was calm enough to cut glass. This is not a personality issue. This is a vendor risk issue. If Jade usually handled the technical side, why was she removed as operational contact? Neither Mason nor Dad had a good answer. Exactly 2 days later, Alana sent formal notice that the hospital network would not renew the pending annual agreement and would reopen bidding for event logistics services. The hospital account was not our only income, but it was our most predictable, and it connected us to donor foundations and nonprofit fundraisers. Losing it was not fatal. It was worse in some ways. It was survivable enough that everyone had to sit inside the consequences. Mom left me a voicemail the day the notice came in. Jade, honey, please call me back. Something happened with the hospital contract, and your father is very upset. We need to talk as a family. I listened to it while folding laundry. Then I deleted it. Around that time, I got a call from Elliot Grant, operations director at a competing event logistics company in Madison. They were bigger than Harbor and Pine, more corporate and frankly better run. I had dealt with Elliot twice before when we borrowed equipment during peak season. I heard you're no longer with Harbor and Pine, he said. That got around fast. It's a small industry. It is. I'll be clear. I don't need your family's client list. I don't want confidential pricing documents, contract templates, or anything that belongs to them. What I need is the person vendors call when everything falls apart. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. He offered me an operations manager role with higher pay, health insurance that did not require me to beg my parents for reimbursement, actual PTO, and written authority over event logistics decisions. He also sent the offer through email, with a job description that used words like compliance, vendor coordination, escalation management, and contract review. Not paperwork. I accepted. The night after I signed the offer, my parents showed up at my duplex. It was raining, the steady Wisconsin kind that makes every porch light look tired. I saw Dad's truck pull up through the front window. Mom got out holding a casserole dish covered in foil. The casserole was almost funny. In our family, casserole meant, let's pretend nobody needs to apologize because food has arrived. I opened the door but did not step aside right away. Mom looked smaller than usual, her hair frizzing around her face. Dad looked angry, but underneath it he looked scared. Can we come in? Mom asked. I let them in. They sat at my kitchen table. Mom put the casserole in the center like an offering. Pepper sniffed Dad's boot and then wisely left the room. Dad started. This has gone far enough. I leaned against the counter. Has it? We need you to come back temporarily, Mom said. Just 90 days. Just to stabilize things. No. Dad's eyes flashed. You haven't even heard the offer. I heard enough. Mom folded her hands. Jade, we need you to be mature about this. I was mature. I documented everything and left cleanly. Dad slapped his palm lightly on the table, not loud enough to be violent, but loud enough to remind me whose house he thought every room was. You're really going to let your family struggle? There it was. Family loyalty. The phrase he used when he meant unpaid labor swallowed anger, and my name on the emergency call list. I let my family take credit, I said. I let my family underpay me. I let my family call my job paperwork. I'm done letting my family turn consequences into my responsibility. Mom's eyes filled. We never meant to hurt you. That was the closest she had come to an apology, and even that managed to avoid what they had done. You meant to protect Mason, I said. Hurting me was just acceptable collateral. Dad looked away first. Before either of them could answer, Mason called Mom. She glanced at her phone and declined it. He called again. Then he called me. I let it ring until it stopped. Then a text came through from him. Mason. Where is the hospital COI thing? I looked at my parents. He still can't find the certificate. Dad stiffened. Put him on speaker. So I called Mason back and tapped speaker. He answered immediately. Finally. Are you happy now? Mom and Dad are here, I said. You're on speaker. A pause. Then good. Maybe they can talk some sense into you. What do you need? I asked. The hospital COI thing. I can't find the right one, and now Alana's acting like we're some fly-by-night operation. It's in the transition folder. There are like 8 PDFs. Transition folder, client accounts, hospital network, insurance. Use the one labeled current expires June 30th. The additional insured wording is in the document right next to it. Why didn't you just tell me that? I just did. No, I mean before. It was in the tracker. He made a frustrated sound. Nobody reads those folders, Jade. You buried me in spreadsheets. Dad closed his eyes. I looked at my mother, then at the casserole, then at the rain sliding down my kitchen window. You asked for everything in one folder, I said. Normal people don't read 20 tabs. People running companies do. The silence after that was long enough for Mason to realize he had said it in front of our parents. He recovered badly. This is sabotage. You're mad because I got promoted, so you made everything impossible. I did not delete a file, hide a password, contact a client, or change a deadline. I gave you the system I used to keep the company running. You mean your system? I mean the company's system. Dad finally spoke. His voice was lower than before. Mason, hang up. But, Mason started. Hang up. The call ended. For a few seconds, my kitchen was quiet except for the rain and the hum of the refrigerator. Mom whispered, Jade, please. Just help us get through the season. I can't. You mean you won't, Dad said. I mean I accepted another job. Mom stared at me. What? I start Monday. Operations manager. Better pay, benefits, clear authority, and a written job description. Dad looked genuinely stunned. He looked stunned like the idea that another company would value me immediately had not occurred to him. With who? He asked. That doesn't matter. It matters if you're taking our clients. I didn't take files, pricing, lists, templates, or contacts. I haven't solicited anyone. My new employer made that very clear, and so did I. Mom's voice sharpened. After everything we gave you? I almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. You gave Mason the company, I said. You gave me the lesson. Dad stood up. This company is your family. No, I said. It was my job. You made that clear when you handed it to Mason and told everyone I ran the desk. Mom started crying then quietly. I believed the tears were real. I also believed they were mostly for the story she had lost. The one where her son carried the legacy and her daughter kept the machinery hidden so nobody had to feel embarrassed. Dad picked up the casserole and set it back down, as if even he understood taking it would be too petty and leaving it would be too intimate. In the end, he left it on my table. They went home without apologizing. I threw the casserole away the next morning. Not because it tasted bad. I never tasted it. I just could not stand opening my fridge and seeing another container full of things nobody wanted to say. My new job was not magical. It was still event logistics, which meant storms, cranky clients, missing linens, trucks stuck behind construction, and people acting like a tent stake had personally betrayed them. But there was a difference between hard work and invisible work. At Grant Event Logistics, if I stayed late, Elliot noticed. If a client needed after-hours emergency support, it rotated through a paid on-call schedule. If a salesperson promised something that operations could not deliver, the answer was not "Jade will figure it out." The answer was a meeting, a correction, and sometimes a very uncomfortable conversation for the salesperson. About 2 months after I started, the hospital network opened formal bids for its event logistics services. Elliot told me about it in his office with the door open. "I want you on the operations proposal," he said. "But we are doing this clean. No Harbor and Pine documents. No confidential knowledge. Nothing that even smells like a problem." "Good," I said. "I don't want their mess following me." We built the proposal around our own capacity, risk controls, response times, backup vendors, and escalation procedures. Alana was part of the evaluation committee, but procurement ran the process. There were scoring sheets, legal reviews, insurance requirements, and a presentation where I answered questions about municipal permits and temporary structure inspections, while nobody interrupted to translate my job into paperwork. A few weeks later, Grant Event Logistics won the account. Alana called me after the formal notice went out. "We followed procurement rules," she said. "Your team was simply the strongest." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "Also," she added, "for what it's worth, it was good to see you in a room where people let you finish your sentences." That one hit harder than I expected. Harbor and Pine did not collapse overnight. I know people like stories where the wrong people lose everything by Friday, but real consequences are usually less cinematic and more expensive. They lost the hospital network contract and 2 connected nonprofit events that preferred approved hospital vendors. A tent supplier moved them from net 15 terms to deposit up front after Mason missed a payment deadline. Monica stopped accepting incomplete records and charged extra cleanup fees. The County Business Journal feature on Mason quietly disappeared after the hospital renewal fell through. They hired an outside operations consultant at a rate that would have made my old salary look like a rounding error. Trevor left in August for a warehouse management job with a company that supplied restaurant equipment. He texted me a photo of his new office, which was really just a desk beside some shelving, but he looked happy. "Trevor, they're paying a stranger to explain the spreadsheet you made in 2019. Jade, please tell me the stranger at least reads the tabs." "Trevor, he printed them. Your dad called him thorough." I laughed so hard Pepper jumped off the couch. Mason kept the title of CEO. From what I hear, he still attends chamber breakfasts and talks about brand evolution. But Dad signs off on more decisions now, the consultant handles deadlines, and vendors ask for confirmation in writing before they trust anything Mason says. His authority exists mostly on business cards. My parents and I are not close. Mom texts sometimes, usually around holidays, usually with a tone that suggests enough time has passed for me to stop being difficult. Dad sent one message in October that said, "Hope your job is going well." I replied, "It is. Hope you're well too." That was the whole conversation. I do not answer Harbor and Pine questions. I do not troubleshoot missing files. I do not explain cancellation clauses. When a former vendor accidentally emailed my old personal address about a deposit, I replied with Mason's company email and nothing else. One Friday night in November, I had 3 friends over for dinner at my duplex. Just chili, cornbread, and a grocery store apple pie warming in the oven. My kitchen windows fogged from the heat. Pepper parked herself under the table like she had been invited. Someone spilled shredded cheese on the floor, and nobody acted like it was a crisis. Halfway through dinner, I realized my phone had been face down on the counter for 2 hours. No buzzing. No emergency calls. No warehouse alarm app. No Mason asking where the pie thing was. No dad texting "call me now." No mom asking me to be mature. After everyone left, I stood in the quiet kitchen, opened my phone, and deleted the old warehouse alarm app. It asked if I was sure. I was. For years, I thought being indispensable meant I was safe. What it really meant was that nobody had a reason to respect my limits because I kept saving them from the cost of ignoring me. I did not destroy my family's business. I did not steal clients. I did not sabotage Mason. I handed them the exact work they said I did and let them prove whether it was as small as they claimed. They proved it wasn't. And for the first time in my adult life, I sleep with my phone volume off. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.